Hello everyone, welcome back to the Zach F1 channel. And in today's episode, I have another F1 Fantasy chip selection for you. As yes, the Brazilian Grand Prix is going to be a sprint race Grand Prix, which means you should be using a chip. So without any more dilly-dallying, let's get into which chips you should use. So, Brazil as a track offers quite a few overtakes. We saw a lot last year at the sprint, and we're probably going to be seeing a lot more this season as well. However, even though all of it sounds sunshine and rainbows, well, if there isn't sunshine and rainbows, there are going to be a few issues. And with the forecast looking like it is going to rain, that is going to be hugely detrimental to using an F1 Fantasy chip. You have to be very careful because Brazil can be very chaotic with just a lot of crashes, a lot of crazy weather making changeable conditions. We've all seen it around Brazil, how hectic it can get. And that's why you have to be careful about selecting the right chip when and where. So, now that you know a few bits of information that you need to know that are key for the Brazilian Grand Prix, here are my preferences for the chips you should use. Now, my preference this weekend is if you have the no negative or autopilot chip, this is the weekend to use it. So, no negative basically means your team can't take negative points. So, if they get overtaken and they get a position lost minus point, they won't be getting that. If they get a DNF of minus 20, they won't be getting that. And at a race like I mentioned, which is chaotic, that is very crucial, especially in changeable weather conditions. Now, autopilot, again, similar premise. If your 2x driver doesn't score as much as another driver on your team, it swaps your 2x to the best driver on your team. I could have been very happy with this in Mexico, however, I did not think that would be the case. However, and a race again where you could see a crash right at the front with Verstappen and Norris potentially, and then Sainz or Leclerc comes through, or maybe Piastri, then that autopilot could be very handy. So that is why I think no negative and autopilot are my preferences for this weekend. However, if you don't have them, there are still plenty of other chips that you could use that are still decent options. So first up is the extra DRS. Now, it's not my favorite for this track, again, because of how chaotic it is, and you have to get some of these bigger chips right. The biggest chips in F1 Fantasy are extra DRS and limitless, so you have to get those two right. And in extra DRS, you get 3 times on your driver. So let's say Lando Norris scores 50 points, you'll get 150 points. And you also get the normal 2 times on your second best driver, whoever you pick. Carlos Sainz, Charles Leclerc, Oscar Piastri, George Russell, whatever money you have for that selected driver, you will get 2 times on them as well. However, this brings in a lot of situations where you can't use this chip. First of all, if it is raining, it is too risky to use this, especially when Qatar, you know it's not going to rain. It's in the Middle East, so there's going to be no rain. You will be able to predict exactly what's going to happen from the sprint quali to the race. That's a very useful thing to have. Even if it is the final sprint and you have to use a chip and it's a little bit nerve-wracking, that is very useful information. However, at Brazil, you have to have the top 2 premium drivers for extra DRS. So, let's say Norris and Leclerc are the top 2 drivers and you can afford to have them, then it's okay to use extra DRS. And if they qualify first and second in the sprint quali, 100%. But if you can't afford to bring in the top 2 drivers, then it's not worth using extra DRS until now. It's better to wait till Qatar. Again, let's say Verstappen puts it on pole or second place and gets a little bit crazy, and Piastri's only 6th, maybe the Mercedes get involved as well, and you don't really know who's going to come second or first, then you're not going to want to use extra DRS. It's too risky. The same thing happened in Kota, and I very much predicted, and it was correct, that it was just too crazy to predict how to extra DRS, and most people who did extra DRS didn't have the double Ferrari, which would have been the best move. So you have to make sure you bring in the best 2 drivers if you are going to use extra DRS. Now, limitless, even though it's not my favorite to use here, would still be a very decent option. A lot of overtaking, like I mentioned, and the limitless team is pretty straightforward. Ferrari versus McLaren have been the best 2, so you'd have Ferrari and McLaren as your constructors, and Lando Norris, Oscar Piastri, Charles Leclerc, Carlos Sainz, 4 of your drivers, and then the 5th driver used to be very hard to get around because you had a lot of potential. However, these days we know it's going to be Max Verstappen. He's going to be in the middle. It's literally just Ferrari versus McLaren with Max Verstappen as that little cherry on top. A very big cherry, and we like to see it. However, Mercedes have sort of fallen off a bit, and Sergio Perez can't even crack the top 10. So That is your limitless team if you're going to use it in Brazil this weekend. And then I really beg that you do not use wildcard or final fix this weekend. Now, these chips can be used anywhere. So chips normally are better to be used at sprint race weekends because you get more points at sprint race weekends, meaning there are more points up for grabs to ×3 to get your limitless points a lot higher than you'd normally get on a normal race weekend. Just look at the average from last race weekend in Mexico to Kota, and that was a sprint race. Now, that wasn't anything crazy for a sprint race or a normal race, but that just is the average difference from a sprint race position of points to a normal race. That's why you need to use them. However, wildcard is literally just changing your team around, so you don't really need to use that at sprint race weekend unless your team is in dire need of changing. It's your only chip. And same goes with final fix. You can only use this at one point in a race weekend. So if you use it after the sprint race, it's the exact same as using it after quali. All it is switching a driver around. It doesn't really change exactly what's going to happen in the race. So you can use that at any race weekend. It doesn't have to be a sprint race weekend. And especially if you have multiple chips like Extra DRS Limitless left over, you want to be using these ahead of those chips. Now, if you only have these chips left and it looks like a good time to use them, fair enough. But put these at the back of your priority list. However, this video is very short and sweet because that is all you need to know about the F1 Fantasy chips for the Brazilian Grand Prix and a little bit of the Qatar Grand Prix that I sprinkled in as well. However, I hope you all enjoyed this video and I hope it helped you select the chip that you are going to use in Brazil, because I still think at a sprint race weekend it is very important that you at least try to use a chip if you have especially 2 or more remaining. But anyway, if you like what you saw, like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for the support, and as always, I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.